Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Completionist, and we are here once again with more content on Superhero Month. Now this week's superhero is one that you all know well, and if you can't tell, can you tell which one it is? Who is it? When you think of Spider-Man 2, that movie that stars Jamie Foxx as Electro might spring to mind. But this is not your little brother Spider-Man 2. No, this is the original Spider-Man 2 from back in 2004 when there was no Marvel Cinematic Universe. The only decent Marvel movies that we had at the time were X-Men and Blade. The comic book movie genre itself was still growing into the box office behemoth that it would eventually become. Meanwhile, over in video game land, the breadth and budgets of many titles were getting bigger and bigger. Players had more access to more options and playable areas in their games than ever, and so began the meteoric rise of open-world gaming. Two genres across two mediums were both reaching unprecedented levels of scope, scale, and popularity, and Spider-Man 2 was right in the middle of it. Now, the game based on the first Spider-Man movie was simple and fun, but very unmemorable. It featured the voice talents of a couple of cast members from the movie, and it also featured a somewhat impressive New York City in its levels. But it just couldn't seem to make a lasting impression. However, when the time came to adapt the sequel, players were finally given the chance to experience what it truly feels like to be Spider-Man. With its release in 2004, Spider-Man 2 the video game presented players with an extensive array of combat techniques, a great variety of missions to accomplish, and, most importantly, a huge realistic Manhattan to explore, rooftop by rooftop. It was more than a step up from its predecessor. It was considered by many to be the ultimate Spider-Man experience. Not the ultimate Spider-Man experience, but you get the drift. And it's a title that is still fondly remembered by many. Spider-Man may not have gotten things right the first time, but everyone deserves a second chance.
The blade that pierced his body came from his gilder. The blade that pierced his body came from your glider. The blade that pierced his body came from his trailer. The blade that pierced his heart.
I said a second chance, not 12. Jesus. The plot of Spider-Man 2 the video game closely follows the plot of Spider-Man 2 the movie, with some minor changes here and some major changes there. The story centers on Peter Parker's struggles to balance his life as a hero with his mild-mannered life as a loving nephew, a good student, and a supportive friend. When our tale begins, Peter is observing a demonstration by Dr. Otto Octavius, who's about to realize his lifelong dream of creating an infinite energy source for the benefit of mankind. Before long, the hubris kicks into gear and the experiment goes horribly wrong. Thankfully, Spider-Man crashes the party and shuts down the reactor before it annihilates the whole city. But unfortunately, both Dr. Octavius and his wife, Rosie, are struck with stray plasma bolts, leaving him permanently and psionically fused to his mechanical tentacles, and her as dead as the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. By the time Octavius recovers, he's crazy as balls and hell-bent on exacting his revenge on Spider-Man for ruining his life and killing his one true love. How he came to believe that Spider-Man was responsible? No one knows.
I know, sir.
The Osborn's butler? What the hell do you know?
I know that the blade that pierced Dr. Octavius' wife's body came from his glider.
What? It's not a direct translation of the movie's story. In addition to the Dr. Octopus thread, there are also appearances by other classic Spider-Man characters that weren't in the movies. There are so many little plots included in the game that the story's pacing ends up feeling broken and a bit random. Hell, the inciting incident doesn't even kick in until about halfway through the game. But it's honestly not that big of a deal. The main narrative of Peter Parker balancing his two lives is always front and center, and the game has plenty of other great features to make up for it. After all, just because the majority of the writing in Spider-Man comics in the 90s was an incomprehensible mess, doesn't mean that we can't enjoy the way Todd McFarlane drew Spider-Man like a badass. We miss you, 90s comic book art. Now, it's no secret that Spider-Man 2 the game tries to emulate Spider-Man 2 the movie as much as possible. From its sweeping shots of New York City during its opening credits, to the creepily rendered visage of Kirsten Dunst. It's truly like playing through the movie. Speaking of freaky faces, they're all over this game's full motion videos. The in-game models aren't so bad, but the ones that appear in the cutscenes really dive into not the uncanny valley. That would imply that they're extremely lifelike with a slight flaw. This is like the mundane hill. Stay away from the mundane hill, you guys.
The mundane that pierced his body came from your hill.
Hey! Knock it off. Thankfully, the backgrounds are much prettier to look at. The sheer size of the city, which includes all of those New York landmarks, is pretty impressive, and it's also really nice to look at during the nighttime while the lights are shining. Speaking of lights, the subtle shifts from day to night are immersive and downright gorgeous. Spider-Man 2 also features voiceover work from people who were actually in the movie, such as Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, and Alfred Molina. And their performances range from great—
Oh no, Mary Jane's play. If I hurry, I can still make it in time.
to obviously phoned in. But the real star of the show is Bruce Campbell, who reprises his role as the game's narrator. He's known for being snarky and passive-aggressive as he delivers important information to the player, and he's still got it.
Well, sequel time already, huh? Welcome back, I guess. I'm sure you miss me more than I missed you.
The music in the game ranges from orchestral to jazzy. The problem is that there aren't enough tracks to keep you from getting bored as you swing around from the city. But the sound effects are one of the things that make you feel the most like Spider-Man. It's so goddamn exhilarating to hear the wind rush past your ears as you pick up speed while swinging through the city. It's a super small detail that makes a world of a difference. So thanks, random designer that came up with that and fought to keep it in the game. You're a bro. Lots of Spidey games have come and gone, many of which have attempted to emulate another iteration of Spider-Man from throughout his long history. But it's the little intricacies, as opposed to the in-your-face features, that make Spider-Man 2 look and feel as good as it does. Now, just make me a version of this that features Japanese Spider-Man. The world needs this, you guys. I need this. We all need this. Spider-Man 2 is a quintessential open-world game. There's a whole lot to do in it, but most of the time, its simplest features are its best features. You'll be swinging around, collecting items, racing against the clock, and battling thugs. And since you're so dang heroic, you'll be earning hero points for just about everything you do. You'll need these points in order to complete chapters and buy upgrades from the Spidey store. Spidey's combat capabilities are surprisingly versatile, fun, and well executed. He can evade, perform combos, utilize his webbing, and even perform a full-on rolling Azuna drop. And despite what you might expect, things aren't too mashy here either. Precision is required to get the best out of Spider-Man's fighting, which makes sense. He's not a bruiser, he's Spider-Man. He's delicate. And then there's the swinging. Oh my god, the swinging! The swinging feels perfect! You have so much control and freedom that you can literally lose hours while playing this game. You can lose yourself in this game, and that's not even while playing through the missions or stopping crimes, but just by zoning out and swinging around. It's by far the best aspect of this game, and it's a shame that this mechanic has yet to be perfectly recreated in another Spider-Man game, or any game for that matter. It wouldn't be an open world game without lots of little tiny quests and random encounters. The NPCs that have the green question mark above their heads— I'm sorry, I had a Riddler flashback. I'm so sorry. The NPCs that have a green marker above their heads have a mission for you. These involve saving people from falling off of buildings, stopping carjackings, and foiling robberies. The random encounters aren't that much different. Instead of initiating these quests by talking to an NPC, they just pop up as you're exploring the city. They include random muggings, punishing civilians for exhibiting road rage, and saving the wayward balloons of the city's children.
He stole my balloons!
Now, you don't have to complete these random missions if you don't want to. You could very well ignore people's cries for help, but that wouldn't be very Spider-Man-like. That seems more up symbiote Spider-Man's alley. Around the city, you'll come across blue markers that will trigger races. Spider-Man must swing, jump, and climb through various checkpoints in a specific sequence while performing the necessary tricks in order to advance to the finish line. There are a crap ton of these races, and some of them can be very, very hard. But if you need a break from progressing the story, you can always do a side mission or two. These can be triggered at will and include tasks like racing towards a date with Spider-Man's on-and-off-again flame Mary Jane, taking photos at specific spots around town for the Daily Bugle, and delivering hot pizzas. They'll all nab you some extra hero points, and they'll all eventually end up feeling like work. When it comes to your enemies, the vast majority of them are nameless generic thugs. There is some slight variation here and there, but for the most part, they're functionally the same. Things start to get really interesting though when you get to fight other enemy types, such as flying alien robots, hopping murder clowns, and bad dudes in power armor. I mean, look, that's the game. The boss fights will pit you against many favorites from Spidey history, like the Rhino and the Shocker. To beat these guys, you'll have to dodge, avoid their attacks, or search the immediate area for switches to press before they're vulnerable to attack. Mysterio, however, is more of a thinking man's boss. Rather than getting his hands dirty, he prefers to prove that he's better than Spider-Man by challenging him to games, puzzles, and obstacle courses. He's actually not bad once you get the hang. Oh god, no. No, not you. No, not again. I stopped you. I stopped you!
Do you require assistance, sir?
You get out of here, Bernard! Poor Spidey just can't seem to catch a break. In the middle of his identity crisis, Dr. Octopus decides to get back at him by kidnapping Mary Jane. Spider-Man tracks Doc Ock to his waterside laboratory where he's reconstructed his original Dangerous as Hell experiment. As our hero frees MJ, Octodad slams him in the head, removing his mask. With his true identity revealed, Spider-Man's final battle with Dr. Octopus is about to pop off. This fight is a piece of cake once you know what you're supposed to do. You'll first have to press a bunch of switches that are placed all around the arena. Reaching some of them will require some climbing and swinging since there's a giant hole in the floor. Even though Doc Ock is taking shots at you, they're easily dodged. The only real threat is the randomly pulsating energy field, which will knock you on your butt and take a good amount of life away from you if it touches you. Surprise, surprise, hitting all the switches does absolutely nothing to stop the reactor, but it does finally render the good doctor vulnerable to do damage. Just like the game's previous Dr. Octopus fights, you'll have to dodge each of his tentacles individually, making sure to tether them all to the ground with a web shot. Once all of his arms are tied up, you've got your chance to put the spider sting on him. Wash, rinse, repeat a few times, and it's game over for Doc Ock. Beating the heck out of Octavius has apparently slapped some sense into him, since he instantly regrets all of his villainous deeds. Isn't that convenient? In order to stop the out-of-control reactor, Dr. Octopus decides to sacrifice himself. He accepts that he alone was responsible for his wife's death and commands Spider-Man to escape with Mary Jane. With no protestation whatsoever, Spidey grabs MJ and gets the hell out of there. Once things have calmed down, Peter reiterates that he can't be with Mary Jane because his life as a hero will place her in too much danger. He claims that he can't make that selfish choice for her sake, and they part ways. Cut to sometime later, and Spidey is moping out of his window. Suddenly, Mary Jane shows up and tells him to take his chauvinism and shove it. She's a grown woman, and she can choose to put herself in danger for love's sake if she wants to. Right on, sister, you tell him. You don't need no Spider-Man to tell you what you can't and can't do. This is one of those games, you guys. One of those games that wouldn't be so bad to complete if you didn't have a bunch of seemingly useless collectibles. These collectibles come in the form of tokens, which can be found all around New York. There are skyscraper tokens, which are located at the top of buildings, buoy tokens, which are found out at sea, hideout tokens, which you can find in the seediest locations in the city, and secret tokens, which are simply hidden in the most random and diabolical places. There are hundreds of these these things, and they're hard to track down. Sure, you'll come across loads as you play naturally, but trying to get them all without a checklist or any hints of some sort is a real pain. To make matters worse, the only real reward you get for collecting these things is an upgrade to your wall sprint technique, and that's only for collecting the skyscraper tokens. It's a living. Remember those races? Well, there's still a ton of them, and many of them are brutally hard. In order to meet the required time in order to beat them, you're really going to have to possess a mastery of Spider-Man's traversal techniques, as well as pre-existing knowledge of which direction to swing next, which unfortunately only comes after trial and error. If you thought hunting tokens took time, then prepare for these races to become your life for a little while. On the bright side, beating the game will give you access to a movie theater where you can review the game's cutscenes, and a fight arena where you can battle against all of the game's enemies over again, including bosses, at your leisure. Speaking of beating the game, there isn't really a new game plus, but there are 2 extra missions after the end of the game. There's nothing really to them, unfortunately, as they just have you collecting huge amounts of hero points. Start saving those balloons, guys. And what do you get for collecting every token, finishing every race, and generally being the best superhero that New York has to offer? You get absolutely nothing for your efforts. I guess this is what it feels like to be Spider-Man. If you're trying to complete this game, then I hope you've got the heart for it. Spider-Man 2 is highly enjoyable, especially if you appreciate the characters and their world. Even if you're not a Spidey fan, the combat and swinging mechanics are worth the price of admission. The missions provide lots of fun, even though you'll be repeating many of them over and over. Unfortunately, if you're looking to complete this game, then you're going to eventually feel the full force of open world fatigue. In my playthrough of Spider-Man 2, there were 13 game over screens, 97 failed race attempts, 392 tokens collected, countless hero points collected. Seriously, I lost count. 77 hours of total playtime, and dozens of disappointed children whose balloons I chose not to save. It was a real treat to revisit this classic and take a trip down nostalgia lane. Even with all of its problems, it's clear why people still talk about Spider-Man 2.
When Blade pierced Deacon Frost's heart in the trailer.
Oh no, you don't! Come here! Shh! No! Shh!
Glenda.
No!
Blade 2.
No!
Blade Trinity. Ryan Reynolds.
Spider-Man 2 the movie, awesome. Spider-Man 2 the game, meh? It's kind of good, kind of bad, right? I gave it a pretty good review so far, right? The game has great gameplay, it's a good time, sure, but completing this game will destroy you, and at the end, you get nothing. Sometimes it just beats me up inside when I get to the end of those games and I don't get to experience any kind of completion exposure for what it is. Bums me out. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of play it.
Play it.
That's all me for today, guys. So please, as always, let us know what you thought about today's episode somewhere on the internet. Your completionist question of the day is, if you were Spider-Man, who would you date? Anyone. It could be anyone. You got Mary Jane. You got Megan Fox. Because why would you date Megan Fox if you were Spider-Man? I don't know. Maybe you suddenly have a very big crush on Megan Fox. I would not pick Megan Fox. Megan Fox is not the person that I would choose to date if I was Spider-Man. Mark, now if you excuse me, show a picture of Megan Fox for the next few minutes. Uncut, just show a picture of Megan Fox. I don't know why it's so funny. If you were a superhuman Spider-Man, why I don't know. I would not pick Megan Fox. That's Mike. Turn the cameras off. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm a human.